You are listening to episode 30 of the EU Startups podcast, today with Ondrej Kovarik, who is a member of the European Parliament and a chairman of the working group about access to finance for SMEs.
Welcome to EU Startups podcast. Today we are really excited to be joined by a member of the European Parliament, Ondrej Kovarik, who has been a member of the Parliament since 2019. He is also the chair of the European Parliament's working group on access to finance for SMEs. So he has a lot of really valuable insights from these upper echelons of government that he can share with us today. And he's also a member of Renew Europe, which is a pro-European party within the Union. And it's really dedicated to creating a thriving economy based around tech, innovation, as well as prioritising investment in a sustainable future. And so these are all different things that we will touch on today in the podcast. So Ondrej, thank you very much for joining us. It's a real privilege to have you.
Thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So just to kick things off, could you perhaps give us just a brief introduction into the European Parliament Working Group on Access to Finance for SMEs? What are the key aims? How does it work?
So thanks for the question and thank you for the interest. I think the key point that I would like to raise is that it is actually the first time in this Parliament's mandate since 2019 when such a working group that is dealing specifically with the access to finance for small and medium-sized enterprises has been established. And it was actually an initiative that was carried out especially through and thanks to my colleagues in the Renew Europe group, because we believe that the focus on SMEs in European policy making needs to be strengthened, and that is one part of that initiative. It's a working group that is gathering members from the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs. It's a cross-party working group, so we have representatives from all the major political groups in the European Parliament, and we meet every 2 months in average to discuss some specific issues that is linked to the access to finance for SMEs. We invite guests from the institutions, from stakeholders, from the industry to give us their insight, and we discuss some specific policy initiatives or some specific issues that are linked to mainly concerns and possible obstacles for SMEs to access finance in Europe.
Okay, interesting. And so how did you become involved within this working group, and what was the inspiration behind setting it up?
The inspiration is actually based on some previous work done on the European Parliament. There are many other platforms, so-called, where the issues of SMEs is actually handled and discussed. There are various intergroups and other platforms, but there was none specifically linked to the access to finance for SMEs. And when the working groups under the committee, Econ Committee realm were established, we as a Renew Europe group, we pushed for a specific initiative on access to finance for SMEs, and I was among the members that were dealing with it, and then had the opportunity and sort of a possibility to represent our group as a chair, and I think this was for me it's a great honor, but it's also a huge pleasure actually to discuss these issues, because I believe first that they are very important, and second they're close to my heart as well in terms of bringing some tangible benefits and helping SMEs to grow in Europe.
Sure. And so what are the key goals of the working group in terms of encouraging SMEs across Europe to grow? How do you make sure that the SMEs in Czechia, for example, grow just as much as those coming from France or Germany?
Well, one of the key aims is actually to explore, discuss, and to initiate possibly policy responses, especially on the European level, to the issue of access to finance. I mean, you specifically mentioned in your question some member states, some countries.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is actually one of the problems that we see currently in Europe is that very often the market is fragmented. It's actually
Absolutely.
very much linked to their national markets, and I think one of the aim is actually to promote policy initiatives that would actually also help to SMEs in order to access also the cross-border finance. We have in the European Union an initiative that is called Capital Markets Union, where we try to build up a functioning union of capital markets where various types of companies can actually look for financing, and I think this is one of the key aims. Also, the other one, and I think that is something where we would all agree, there is a still problem of a red tape. Administrative burden that is excessive, especially for small and medium-sized companies.
Mm-hmm.
They have to deal with it. So one of the aims is actually to discuss these obstacles, to see where we can cut red tape, where we can use, for instance, digitalization on both sides. So be it on the side of the administration, but also on the side of the SMEs, to overcome those obstacles, and I think in general to make sure that the business environment in Europe is actually open and beneficial to creation of new companies, but not only. I think for us the key issue is also not only to concentrate on the initial stages of setting up a company and let it grow, but I think also to make sure that when the company reaches some critical size and the critical position on the market, that it can actually still grow in Europe, and it can stay here and create value, create jobs, and grow within the European market, which I think until now is very often not the case, actually.
Great, perfect. So I see kind of three key core areas there coming out. So kind of creating this cross-border access to financing, creating a more united Europe rather than these small, medium businesses kind of being nationally constructed. And then secondly, helping to overcome red tape, overcome administrative burden. And then thirdly, kind of focusing on the long-term growth of Europe's innovation and startup ecosystem. So I was just wondering if we could quickly touch on this idea of creating a more united entrepreneurial circle within Europe. Do you see currently that it's more nationally constructed SME growth, or why is it the case that we need to now push and create a more united ecosystem?
I think actually that this is, in my view, this is the very basic idea of the single market. So if we believe that there is a single market in Europe, and I think there is a single market in Europe, so basically all the 27 member states can actually interact with each other, and the single market based on liberties of movement of people, of capital, of goods, of services, that actually is in my view the very underlying policy, for having more ambitious approach in terms of also creating a cross-border and truly European access to finance. And to your first question, I think indeed there's actually a lot of companies that are actually in the initial stage very much built on the national market and the conditions that are in place in various member states, and they find sometimes quite difficult actually to then scale up their activities in other member states, because they realize that some of the conditions or requirements in terms of legal requirements, in terms of taxation, are different, and they would need to undergo various procedures once again. And I think these are the issues that are sort of slowing us down. And in terms of access to capital, if you look at the European SMEs, in a large majority of them would look for banking financing, so bank loans and etc. Those are also very much constructed on a national basis. And I think the idea of creating a capital markets union is actually to sort of enhance that possibility to look, for instance, for equity financing across Europe, but also to give to the investors a better overview of what are the investment opportunities across Europe. And I think that would sort of also fill the gap that the European Union has compared, for instance, to the United States, where the access, especially to the venture capital, is much easier in terms of the entire US market. And I think the very idea of helping the capital markets union to build and grow is exactly that. So that you mentioned a couple of member states earlier. So to give you an example, that, for example, to be a Czech company that can actually find an easily its investor, for instance, in France, and go ahead, with their plans, and also to scale up their activities, not only in the single market, but also if the ambition is there, also globally.
Absolutely. Okay. And so, what kind of policies are you proposing, or what kind of ideas and initiatives are you putting across that would help SMEs scale up and deal with these red tape, bureaucracy, administration issues that they have to overcome?
I think specifically for the red tape, it's really about finding ways how we can harmonize the approaches across the union, and also I think this idea of having the possibility of passporting if you are licensed, or if you have a sort of a certificate authorization to provide your services, you're registered in one member state, that you can actually easily bring that with you to a different member state and continue the activity also there. I think that could be the big advancement. We were discussing and supporting the idea of single point tax registration. So, meaning that if you're registered in a specific member state, that you don't have to re-register in all the other member states where you go. So to create basically a harmonized framework. I mean, regardless the level of taxation or the tax base, but just the very specific issue of the obligation to go through all the procedures linked to that. And then I think there are some specific initiatives that are already in some concrete terms being implemented. We discussed earlier in our working group in the European Parliament the proposal of the European Commission to set up an IPO fund, which could actually help, especially mid-caps companies that already reached a critical size and who are actually considering a public listing, to have possibility to reach financing that would help them, on one hand, prepare for the listing. The preparatory phases is very, very costly and sometimes very difficult.
Of course, so it's kind of giving the support to get ready and to get going.
Exactly, and then also to help them, for instance, launching the IPO. So that this is, for instance, one of the concrete examples of European action in this regard. Obviously, this is something that is linked to some specific group of mainly medium-sized companies. But I think this is exactly what we were supporting. In terms of financing, for instance, the European Union has adopted, and I had the opportunity to be a shadow rapporteur for that file, a specific financial tool called the Invest EU, which is actually a specific financial instrument with some special focus. And one of the windows of basically the interest of the Invest EU, who would be the target groups. So one of the windows is actually strictly linked to the development of SMEs, and this is exactly the type of financing that can actually, for instance, provide public guarantees for in more convenient types of loans that the SMEs can access at some point. And we also expect the European Commission to come up with some proposals later this year in the fall, which would further enhance the development of the capital markets union, such as, for instance, the Listing Act, but also some proposals to actually simplify the administrative procedures in Europe.
Great. So it's really interesting to hear and to see these things are already in motion, that there's already so many different policies, initiatives, and plans being put into place to really streamline the whole process for SMEs from start to beginning in their scaling journey and to promote the longevity of that. And I'd just be quite interested to know, like, from your personal point of view, what are the key benefits of Europe putting in so much effort and so much attention to our SMEs? What's the benefit of this for our wider European community?
Well, in my view, the benefits are clear. If you look at the European economy, how it is working, how it is constructed, it's and it's sometimes very surprising, but it's not definitely only focusing on the largest and very well-known European companies, but it's actually the SMEs that are the key component of the European economy. As we speak, there's so over 25 million of SME companies in Europe. And it's actually 2/3 of the European economy. So I think it's very important. And in terms of, let's say, if you look at it on more like a macroeconomic perspective, but also in terms of the potential for growth of European economy, this is very much linked to the capacity of SMEs to first to be established, to be created on one hand, and the other hand to maintain and their activities and to be able to grow. I think the SMEs and that I think there's a lot of evidence for that in various studies and surveys. The SMEs are also key drivers for innovation. If you have business environment in Europe, which actually allows for a quick establishing of a startup or a small company, there's very much focused on a specific innovative process, then I think we actually achieve much higher level of innovation in Europe in general. And I think also the business environment should allow us in more flexibility, so that if you create a company, and startups are very fragile entities. They sometimes they are able to grow. Sometimes they are just fail. But the business environment should be actually flexible in terms of allowing for both options, not only to grow but also for failing and then trying something else, something new. Reaching into various sphere of human activity. So I think, in my view, if we want to sustain and achieve a critical level of growth in Europe, I think we simply have to support SMEs, and we have to working in order to establish such an environment that would promote entrepreneurship, that would actually promote the innovation, and really look into this as a huge opportunity. Because if we don't do that, I'm pretty sure that the others or the other jurisdictions, the other countries across the globe will do that, and then we
Sure.
may lack in our potential.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think it's a curiosity of Europe, perhaps, that the economy does in a lot of ways rest on the power and the innovation behind SMEs and the contributions that they're bringing to us on a daily basis. And as you say, like startup culture, startup ecosystem is very fragile. We have a lot of successes, but we also have a lot of failures. And if we strengthen our community, what we can do from the failures is we can learn from the lessons, right? And we can take that forward to better the innovations for the future. So do you see kind of the working group that you have established there helping bring Europe more in line with the startup powerhouse of the United States, for example?
Well, at least that's the ambition, but I would not pretend that everything will change because we have a working group on SMEs. But I think it's a part of a puzzle, and we have to be active in various parts, and we have to be active in various work strands in order to make sure that there is a consistency and coherence in our policies when it comes to the approach to SMEs. We concentrate in our working group specifically on the access to finance because, also based the discussions with the industry, with stakeholders, various SMEs associations, it is clear that the access to finance is one of the key components for the enhanced business environment in Europe for SMEs. Obviously, there are other parts where the European Union should be also active. Mm-hmm. But I truly believe that, by raising various issues and discussing it in the European Parliament, we can actually help to contribute, to first shape the thinking, but also to identify the best suited area of action for European Union, so that we really focus on what is needed, and we actually act there where the SMEs need it the most. And also, I think trying to promote this culture to sort of think SMEs, by default, when you look at the various proposals of European legislation, we have sometimes feeling that the SMEs angle were not fully considered or were not fully taken on board, and I think this is also one of the ambition that myself and other colleagues in the working group have to make sure that this is actually the angle that is always taken into account, especially in those proposals of legislation that will have to be implemented also by the SMEs community, and to have that angle basically sort of by default when drafting and preparing the legislation. It was not always the case, and I really hope that this would become a sort of a norm of how we approach the legislative work in the European Union. But not only the legislation itself, like the hard law, but also other policies and policy initiatives that are promoted on the European level.
Interesting. And so as you've mentioned, the core aim here really is the access to finance, right? For startups to get up and running and to really for SMEs to get going. And I'm wondering if you have any policies already in place or are in the process of being implemented, or any that you would like to see that kind of promote this access to finance to founders who are coming from more diverse backgrounds or are driving more impact driven ventures. Is that something that's on the radar of the working group?
Yes, as well. And I think really this is, in my view, or this should be the main goal of also this Capital Markets Union. I think in terms of various policies that are already in place, there are some initiatives that aim to help SMEs to access to finance, but I'm not 100% sure that those are the best practices or the examples that actually work. I think in general it's about creating a new, let's say, investment culture in Europe, and I think we can see within Europe some good examples in Germany, in France, where the startups and SMEs communities are able actually to easily work in terms of the capital market. But I think there's also a big gap between some of those member states and others, or the majority of others, where this is not actually part of let's say the day-to-day business. And
sure, so there's some discrepancy perhaps.
Indeed, and this is exactly what I think we should try to overcome by creating a common capital markets union where this can be promoted, and that these gaps can be actually filled. But I think there's many issues. There's on one hand it's about promoting Europe itself, I mean, globally. I think it's also about good reporting standards, so that there's a clarity about what opportunities for investors are available in Europe. And I think it is also to try to actually find synergies between the various sources of financing, also in Europe. And I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, this should be sort of a change of a culture. So we should also not only rely on the institutional investors or larger asset managers, venture capital funds, but we have a big gap also in terms of retail investment in Europe. So that the retail investors' money can be actually used, channeled, and obviously then evaluated through the investments into European companies, especially the SMEs, and this is one of the link that we are still missing. Actually, for that we should enter in the fall in the negotiations with the council on the proposal of a long-term investment fund, an LTIF, the abbreviation, which is actually something that is already in place, but is not used very much. But this is exactly one of the tools that can actually help us to, on one hand, promote the retail investors' long-term financing and basically investments in order to use effectively their savings through a safe and reliable investment tool. But on the other hand, because obviously every investment tool has two ends, so investors and the assets where they invest, and on the other hand, to promote and to create this connection with the European economy, and especially European SMEs. And this is what we are about to finalize this fall, and I hope that this will be in place very soon, so that the various stakeholders, be it from the financial world, but also from the business community, can actually use and see its potential.
Interesting. It's really great to hear that these things are in motion. I said that earlier, but it's great to know that these are going on, because a lot of the times we can look at Europe and initiatives happening and we can question, why is this not happening? Why is that not happening? So it's great to know that there are motions being put forward. But related to that, I would be just curious to ask, like, obviously the working group is working tirelessly to promote these initiatives. Has there been any kind of backlash from the rest of the European institutions, or maybe backlash isn't the right word, maybe any pushback or any hesitation to adopt these policies?
I would say in general, the approach to the SMEs and those policies that are actually aiming at and helping or making their life easier have in general very good, I think, well, very good.
They're well supported.
Very well support from most of the institutions. I think I never heard someone saying look, we should not do that, right? But I think the key is how we concretely want to implement them. And then there we can see some potential issues in terms of how for instance, the national government and the national administration are helpful in terms of cutting the red tape. How, for instance, the European Commission, as I mentioned earlier, is actually considering, for instance, the SME angle when they propose and promote a specific piece of legislation. So I think it's maybe sometimes lack of attention that we do not consider sufficient, rather than a sort of a negative approach. But I think this is exactly what I meant by this need for change of our perspective, and also of the culture, so that we have on our mind the specific situation of SMEs and their importance in Europe, and trying to help them to grow with it and stay in Europe. But I wouldn't really say that I would see some sort of animosity or some sort of a negative approach. I think it's more just maybe
it's just not on the radar.
Yeah, lacking the perspective, exactly. Not having SMEs all the time on the radar, and just sort of take they take the situation of SMEs for granted, and to be honest, to a certain extent, I understand that. I see it also when we work with colleagues. It's very difficult to adopt let's say a coherent SME policy initiative or SME framework, because they are very different. The needs are very different. The community is very big, and I don't think we can solve it by putting forward let's say an SMEs Act in Europe, like we do it, for instance, with other types of economic activities. Because it would not fit. There's no one size fits all solution for all the SMEs in Europe. But I think it is exactly what we need, is actually to have that in mind and take this horizontal approach throughout the policy initiatives and the work we do on the European Union, to make sure that they are not forgotten, and they are still sort of part of our consideration. That I think is the key approach there.
Interesting. And as you say, there's no one size fits all approach here to any SME or to anything within the European Union. It's all about being, as you said, taking a horizontal approach, being mindful, and listening to the outcomes, and being prepared to make changes and be flexible when and if needed, right?
Absolutely.
So what would be the key changes that you would like to see in this culture, the key changes that you would like to see in Europe to push forward SMEs in this space?
Well, I would first like to see really, the single market for SMEs working, so that if a company A starts its business in any single member state and wishes to scale up their activities, that the European single market is ready for that. That that there are not obstacles that are actually more sort of deterring the companies from their growth strategies cross border, but that they are rather promoting the sort of intensification of their activities cross border, and I think this would be, in my view, already a very good achievement. We still have some problems in terms of deepening and finalizing the single market for various activities. I think we have a lot of problems in terms of services in Europe. So I think, and many companies, especially now, are dealing very much with provision of services, especially in digital area. So I think this is one point that I would like to address. Second point, I think it's really to create this new culture, so that there is actually a massive amount of possible investment capital that is available in Europe, that is channeled back to European economy, and so that we have that sort of culture created, but also sort of promoted. Because what we see very often, and I think there's a lot of also data on that, we see that there's multiple startups created in Europe, especially since last 5-7 years.
Sure.
When there's really a huge number of them, but especially those who survive and who actually are able to grow, eventually possibly become unicorns. They often leave Europe and go and expand, for instance, through the US market. And
Absolutely.
And that I think
so,
is a big problem in my view.
Absolutely. And why do you think the companies are doing that, and how do we stop it happening?
Well, from various testimonies from companies, it's actually one thing is the facilitation of access to venture capital. Obviously, in the US market, we're really talking about different orders of what is available in terms of capital, but also how sort of easy it is actually to get to. There's a competition of venture capitalists or investors, and I think the other point, in my view, is very much linked to the fact that we still have in Europe a single market, but very often broke down into national markets, which is not very much the case in the US. I mean, you can actually, if you want to expand on the US market, you can do it without any huge obstacles, and reach out to the entire market, which would be over 300 million of customers, which is strange, because obviously we have in Europe much bigger market. And I think if you look at also let's say the closest countries to the Europe, which are not currently part of the European Union, but like United Kingdom, Switzerland, and others, they can still be part of our single market ambition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And help us to reach different level of access to finance, but it's not happening. So I think that the biggest problem is actually that sort of like easy way how you can do it in the US, and also the offer that is there, and I think we need to create the offer or help to create the offer also in the European Union. That's on one hand, but also to make sure that there's a lot of investments actually. If you look at the investments coming from the US to Europe, there's actually a lot of investments that direction. So it seems that Europe is actually attractive also globally, but that it also means that we lose part of the market, and that goes to go somewhere else. So I think we, as we discussed earlier, different culture, better investment opportunities, better overview of the market, maybe better promotion of the market, but also raising up or destroying all those obstacles that are still existing, so that the companies can actually grow through the single market without without being forced to invest heavily in various compliance and administrative issues, because this is something that also, especially for small companies, is extremely difficult. I mean, if you're companies of 10 people, you cannot just take part of your employees and invest their time, energy, and creative thinking into just complying with the administrative tasks. So I think this is in my view one of the biggest problems.
Absolutely, it's for small businesses to overcome those issues. It really is. Sometimes insurmountable, as you say. Just having access to the resources to even begin the process is quite challenging for them. It's fascinating. So Just to kind of round up then, I would just be curious to know, is there any policy or initiative in place at the moment or in the pipeline that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I think in terms of the access to finance and the issues that we discussed, I see those specific initiatives under the Capital Markets Union as promising if they are done correctly and implemented fully. Also, we have in the European Parliament we have initiated and sort of to make also the European Commission more aware and also accountable, a debate. There's a specific annual debate on State of the Union for SMEs. Where the Commission actually brings their views and we discuss it with them as parliamentarians, and this is fully in line with what the Commission has proposed as an SME strategy earlier this mandate, sort of like a comprehensive document that is actually providing various work strands, where we could and should focus our attention on, and so I think this is a sort of a symbolic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Evidence.
It's very exciting to kind of have at our fingertips,
Exactly, this symbolic sort of evidence, that we really take this seriously and we want to work in this direction. Also, our Renew Europe group has created an SME task force where we have colleagues from various committees working horizontally over various types of legislation, and we want to make sure that through a task force, the SMEs concerns are reflected in the work of all the committees that are relevant for that. So not only, for instance, the committee that I sit in on the Economic and Monetary Affairs or the Industry Committee, but also in other committees, such as Transport or Internal Market. So. These are the concrete initiatives that I'm very happy about, that they took place, that they are actually happening. They are live and kicking, and I think this is something that where we can actually show the commitment that we've taken is meant seriously. And I think, as I mentioned, especially those activities linked to the Capital Markets Union. Such as the IPO fund, the Listing Act, the long-term investment funds, some of the financial instruments that are specifically designed to support SMEs, including in the framework of post-pandemic recovery. I think those are really good examples of how we can actually make sure that the SMEs agenda is one of the top priorities and is still there, because I think we not only the SMEs deserve it, but I think we sort of owe it also to business community.
Great, absolutely. I mean, I think our business community and SME community for sure has shown its resilience in Europe over the past couple of years. So it's absolutely wonderful to hear that these initiatives are in place. They are supporting these SMEs to continue to be the bedrock of Europe's economy. So yeah, thank you very much for providing all these insights today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today, Ondrej.
Thank you very much for having me, and then thanks for the chat. I think we covered many important issues, but as I said, this is maybe just the beginning of the work, and we should really continue to support the SMEs, and I'm glad, and I'll be happy to discuss that any time later when we have some other initiatives in place and some other initiatives on our table in the European Parliament.